be very picky about your protein sources. Meat, poultry, fish, eggs, and dairy products are very rich sources of high-quality protein. We know that. But they're not the only sources, nor are they the preferred sources for human health. I love this cartoon. This little rodent is saying to the gorilla, "No meat at all. Are you sure you're getting enough protein?" And the point being that the largest, strongest land animals on the planet are all vegetarian. So that should tell us something. You know, and if you go to, there's a website called veganbodybuilding.com. All three of these people here are 100% vegan bodybuilders or athletes. And if they can do it, we probably can too. You know, there are major advantages to getting protein from plant foods over animal products. You know, plant foods are tremendous sources of phytochemicals and antioxidants. Animal products don't offer that. They're high in iron and zinc like meat is, but they also provide calcium and potassium and magnesium and folate, other nutrients that we don't get a lot of from meat. They provide fiber, they're low in fat, they're cholesterol-free, they're free of new 5-GC, which is a very pro-inflammatory molecule in meat. They're free of carnitine, and carnitine, as we mentioned earlier, is responsible for the production of TMA by gut bacteria, which goes to the liver to form TMAO, which is very atherogenic. They provide a safer form of iron for the body. For example, in legumes, ferritin is absorbed very slowly into the gut, and there are literally thousands of iron atoms in one molecule of ferritin, and then the iron is released slowly as our body needs it. Whereas iron from animal products, the heme iron particularly, is a strong pro-oxidant and increases oxidative stress. So, and of course, the plant foods are free of hormones and antibiotics that are used in animal products. So how much protein do we actually need? Well, the World Health Organization suggests 10 to 15% of calories from protein. The RDA is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. Many dietitians, such as myself, suggest an added 10 to 20% for vegans, simply not because the protein is lower quality, but simply because it's less digestible. So to make up for the lower digestibility of plant protein. And needs are a little higher for children, they're higher for seniors, and they're higher for some athletes. So how much protein do we get in food? Well, animal products, you see somewhere 25 to 90% of calories from protein, depending on the fat content. And for plant foods, veggie meats are mostly protein, 55 to 80%, but whole plant foods, legumes, non-starchy vegetables, are 20 to 40% of calories from protein. Even mushrooms are 30% of calories from protein. So really important, dark leafy greens are 35 to 40% of calories from protein. Of course, you need to eat 30 or 40 cups to get a reasonable amount because they're so low in calories. But a lot of the calories are coming from protein. Grains, nuts, and seeds, about 8 to 17%. The only foods that fall below that, sort of 10 to 15%, are root vegetables and fruits. So if you're eating a variety of plant foods and you're eating enough calories, it's actually hard not to get enough protein. It's just not an issue. So a lot of people say, well, isn't plant protein inferior? And the answer is absolutely not. In fact, most people don't know this, but animals do not make essential or indispensable amino acids. They're all made by plants. And all plants contain all 9 indispensable amino acids. They come from plants either directly by eating plants or indirectly by eating animals that ate plants, or very indirectly by eating animals that ate other animals that ate plants. But they were all made by plants. So it makes no sense to think we can't get them from plants. That's where they're made. Okay? So do we need to complement proteins? Do we need to combine, you know, our grains with legumes in order to get complete protein. And no, we've known for 25 or 30 years that this is not necessary. We can get sufficient of all the indispensable amino acids from plants by eating a variety of plants over the course of a day and by making sure we get enough calories. There's really only two ways of blowing it. One is to get insufficient calories, and the other is to eat mostly junk food or mostly fruit or mostly oil, okay? Otherwise, it's not a big issue. And to put it into some perspective, to meet your daily needs for total protein, say you needed 65 grams of protein a day, and all of the indispensable amino acids you need from just one food, and nobody eats just one food, but this is what you would need. You would need about 1.6 cups of tofu. You would need about 3 beef burger patties. You would need about 3 1/4 to 4 1/2 cups of beans. You would need 1.8 cups of pumpkin seeds. You would need 12 eggs, or you would need about 8 cups of milk. Okay, so you can see it can come from plants as well as animals. So I want to touch on the soy question because I know that there are a large number of vegetarians who now specifically avoid soy and are scared of soy. And most of the negative comments about soy that we see on the internet come from the Weston A. Price Foundation. And the Weston A. Price Foundation is a very anti-vegetarian organization. They actually say, you won't believe this, but they say that the only people that should never breastfeed their children is vegans, because their milk will be inadequate. So they're just very, very anti-vegetarian. And in fact, it's just the opposite. You know, vegans actually have lower levels of environmental contaminants in their breast milk, and their breast milk is very, very good. It may have a little lower levels of omega-3s, but that can be corrected very, very easily. So on to the soy question, is soy safe? Well, this is, to me, the acid test. Let's look at the blue zones. Okinawans are among the healthiest, longest-lived people on the planet. They average 2 servings of soy a day. The Adventists, another one of the blue zones, average around 2 servings a day as well. So to me, if the healthiest, longest-lived people on the planet are eating soy, it can't be poison. You know, they probably wouldn't be the healthiest, longest-lived people on the planet if it was poison. So, you know, the evidence actually suggests protective effects. Prostate cancer, men who drink soy or use soy milk instead of cow's milk have a 30 to 50% reduced risk of prostate cancer. Women who consume soy in childhood and adolescence have a significantly reduced lifetime risk of breast cancer. Women who consume soy as adults, especially Asian women, have a significantly lower risk of breast cancer. Women who have the BRCA1 or 2 gene for cancer, who consume the greatest amount of soy, this was a study in Korea, had a 60% lower risk of cancer. Women who were consuming the highest amounts of meat had a 200% increase in risk of cancer. And people who have breast cancer and consume soy when they have breast cancer, whether or not they're on tamoxifen, have less recurrence, have a greater longevity than people who don't consume soy. It reduces risk of cardiovascular disease. It also reduces risk of kidney disease when it's replaced with, when meat is replaced with soy. Soy has also been found to help reduce menopause symptoms by about 25%, and it even reduces the risk of male pattern baldness, believe it or not. So the thing about soy to me that we need to understand is if you eat soy, and you don't have to, it's not a necessary food. You can eat other legumes if you prefer. Some people are even allergic to soy. But you want to stick to organic soy, and you want to select mostly first-generation soy products. Things like edamame and tempeh and tofu. It doesn't have to be fermented. Soybeans and soy milk that's made with whole organic soybeans. These foods are reasonable soy foods, in my view. And we want to limit our intake of the more highly processed soy foods, especially those, to me, made from soy protein isolates and concentrates, which increase levels of IGF-1 about the same amount as meat would. So what are considered safe intakes? Most of the experts are saying 2 to 4 servings a day, and that's what most of the studies that show protection from soy are showing. This is in the range of 2 to 4 servings a day, but for children, probably not more than 1 to 2 a day. Because of the phytoestrogens in soy, you don't want to overdo the phytoestrogens for children. And it's interesting, the studies on men showing feminizing effects on men with soy. 2 studies. In one study, the guy was eating 14 servings of soy a day, and in the other study, these are just case studies, the guy was eating 18 to 20 servings a day. So if all you eat is soy, yeah, it could cause some problems. At moderate levels, there's no evidence that it causes those kinds of problems. So step 5 is to choose healthy fats. This is our last macronutrient. We want to replace unhealthy fats with healthy fats from whole foods. Quality trumps quantity. Remember the blue zones. The Okinawans eat about 11% of calories from fat. The people in Sardinia and Greece eat about 36 or 37% of calories from fat. They're both, doing really well. To me, it's, again, not so much the percentage of macronutrients, it's the source of the macronutrients that matters. So, when it comes to how we should deal with fat, we need to, number 1, avoid trans fatty acids completely. We need to limit saturated fat, moderate our use of concentrated fats and oils, minimize fried foods and oxidized fats, and include sufficient sources of essential fatty acids in the diet. So we want to make whole foods our primary sources of fats because they're rich in fiber and antioxidants and phytochemicals and sterols and stanols and all of the things that are protective. But concentrated fats and oils should be used more sparingly. As I said, I would equate them to these whole plant foods as I would sugar to high carbohydrate whole foods. Oils are pure fat. They have a little bit of vitamin E and not much else. So we've lost the fiber, we've lost the phytochemicals. So not that they should never be used, but they should be used fairly sparingly, in my view, for most people. There are some people that can afford to use more. What about coconut oil? Is it really a miracle or a menace? And I would say it's neither. Coconut oil is about 87 to 90% of calories from saturated fat. So a lot of experts caution against heavy use because it's so high in saturated fat. However, other types, the saturated fat in coconut oil seems to be a lot less atherogenic than the fat in animal products. And why? Because about 60% of the fat in coconut oil is medium-chain triglycerides. About 45% of it is lauric acid, which is a 12-carbon saturated fat. About 17% is myristic acid, which is a 14-carbon fat, about 8% palmitic acid, and about 3% stearic acid, which is an 18-carbon saturated fatty acid. And the saturated fatty acids that raise LDL cholesterol are lauric acid, myristic acid, and palmitic acid. And so you think case closed, it must raise cholesterol levels. But actually, lauric acid is well known for increasing HDL even more than LDL. So it actually improves the ratio of LDL to HDL a little bit. Medium-chain triglycerides are not stored as fat nearly as readily as the bigger saturated fatty acids like myristic or palmitic acid. So there's an advantage that way too. And also, lauric acid is converted in the body to something called monolaurin, which is antifungal, antiviral, antiseptic, and it has some reasonable properties. So does that mean we should eat coconut oil with abandon? I don't think so. I would treat coconut oil as I would any other oil. I would enjoy mature coconuts in moderation like you would other high plant whole foods like nuts, seeds, and avocados. But I would use coconut oil more sparingly. as you would other concentrated fats and oils. They all contain 120 calories per tablespoon and very few nutrients. Most North Americans can't afford that many empty calories. We want every calorie that we consume to provide the most it can provide for our bodies. So I think this is really important. And you know what I do with coconut oil? I buy a lot of coconut oil, but you know what I use it for? I use it for my skin. It's a wonderful natural moisturizer. And so that's a great use. I add a little bit of vitamin E, sometimes a little shea butter, sometimes a little cocoa butter, and I make, you know, cream out of it. It's a great thing for that. The other thing with fat is we need to be really conscious about exposing our bodies to damaged fats. Do not allow oils to smoke if you're using oils in cooking. You need to keep the temperature moderate. Better still, start with water. And if you need to flavor with a bit of sesame oil or something, add it after the temperature has come down. Never cook with omega-3 rich oils like flax or hemp seed oil. They are very unstable fats. They get oxidized very quickly. And do not burn high-fat foods or allow them to blacken. You want to minimize processed foods, and finally, you want to be very careful about storing all high-fat foods. So when I buy nuts and seeds, for example, if they're shelled, they go in the freezer immediately. Okay, and I mean, you can put them in the refrigerator, but do not leave them at room temperature. If walnuts taste bitter, they are rancid. Okay, and so store your nuts and seeds, take care of them. The first thing, I shouldn't say the first thing I do is put them in the freezer, because actually the first thing I do with nuts and seeds is soak and dehydrate. Because I want to reduce the anti-nutrients, I want to improve the digestibility of the nuts and seeds, and then I freeze them to preserve the fragile fats that are there. So that's just automatic as soon as they're brought home. Unless they're in their shell, obviously. Oh, it depends. The bigger they are, the longer you have to soak them. So for example, small seeds like you know, pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds, you can soak for 4 hours, 6 hours, something like that. But the larger nuts, I would soak for longer. And what I do with almonds is I soak them for at least a day or two, even sometimes 2 days, and I'll rinse them after the first day. But I love when they get really big. They start to taste a bit like coconut, actually, and then I dehydrate them. They're wonderful that way. So what about getting enough of these long-chain omega-3 fatty acids without fish? We absolutely can. Fish, again, do not make DHA and EPA. EPA and DHA are actually made by microalgae. These are tiny plants in the ocean. And at some point along the food chain, the fish get them from the microalgae. Even, you know, little fish eat the microalgae, bigger fish eat the littler fish, and so on. But we can get EPA and DHA directly from microalgae. We can also get it by making it in our own bodies from alpha-linolenic acid, which is the plant omega-3. So how do we optimize our omega-3 fatty acid status? Number one, eat a balanced, healthy diet. It's really important to know that nutritional inadequacies like protein deficiencies, zinc, magnesium, niacin, a lot of nutrients, if we don't have enough of them, we won't be able to convert the plant omega-3 to the bigger, longer docosahexaenoic acid and icosapentaenoic acid, what we call the fish fats. So that's very important. Dietary components like trans fatty acids, excessive intakes of alcohol and caffeine can also impair conversion. Very high-fat diets, diets that are 40% calories plus from fat, also impair the conversion of plant omega-3s into long-chain omega-3s. So how do we make sure we get enough? Well, if you're taking direct sources of EPA and DHA, you just need to meet the RDA, which is 1.1 grams of ALA for women and 1.6 for men. And that you would need to take 2 or 3 times a week, 200 to 300 milligrams of EPA and DHA. Now, for vegetarians and vegans who are not taking direct sources, you need to double your ALA we double the ALA requirements. So then you would be looking at 2.2 for women and 3.2 for men grams of ALA per day. And all of this information is in much, much greater detail in Becoming Vegan Comprehensive Edition and Express Edition in slightly lesser detail, but still in much greater detail than in the presentation. You want to choose foods that are rich in alpha-linolenic acid, so things like ground flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds, walnuts. And it's not that you can't eat whole flax seeds, but they're slippery little seeds. They go right through you. They add beautifully to your stool bulk. They're really good for people who are constipated, but you can't extract a lot of omega-3s unless you're chewing them well. So, you know, in a flax cracker, you'll chew more than, say, what you might sprinkle on a bowl of cereal. So when you're putting it on a bowl of cereal, you definitely want to grind your seed first. And if you grind them, you want to store the ground seed in the freezer to preserve those omega-3s. Walnuts are a good source. Hemp seeds are a reasonable source as well. And just to give you an example, about a tablespoon, a heaping tablespoon of ground flax will give you enough, as will an ounce of walnuts, as will a couple of tablespoons of chia seeds, or about 2 or 3 tablespoons of hemp seeds. And you know, a lot of people don't realize this, but about half the fat in greens is omega-3. So, but you would have to eat 30 cups to get 3 grams because they're so low in fat, but they still are sources. Some people eat too much omega-6, and why would that be a problem? Because omega-6 fats can reduce conversion by about 40 to 50% if you eat too many. They compete for the same conversion enzymes. And so you don't want to, if you're using oil, use the omega-6 rich oils like sunflower and safflower and soy and cottonseed and so forth. And you want to limit foods that are made with those fats as well. Also, it's reasonable to consider a direct source of EPA and DHA. There are all kinds of supplements, especially for those with increased needs, so pregnant and lactating women, or those who may not be good at converting. So people with diabetes, metabolic syndrome, hypertension, for example, or populations who have traditionally eaten a lot of fish, they may not produce the enzymes as efficiently. So this just gives you an example of some of the supplements that are available that are, you know, completely vegan EPA and DHA supplements. And what you would want is maybe 200 or 300 milligrams 2 or 3 times a week.